Right. So you notice John's not here today. Thank you, guys. I don't need the chair, I'll fall over it. I'll walk around and fall over it. John's had a funeral today. Anyway.
He was gonna go to a funeral, but Terry got sick.
Huh?
He was gonna go to a funeral, but Terry
Oh,
got sick,
okay.
so now he's home taking
Now
care
he's
of
home
Terry.
taking care of her. Well, that's,
Yeah.
Well, over the last, ever since October 7th, we've been listening. I don't know if you watch the news every day. I try to get tired of it after 2 or 3 days, so I don't look at it for 5 or 6 days at a time to give myself a break because it gets my mind going. But anyway, after that happened, we have all of these, the United Nations coming down on Israel. The United States is not really doing what they should be doing, kind of turning its back on Israel. They're talking out of both, basically, our government is talking out of each side of their mouth. Yes, we're gonna be with you, but yet they want them to have a ceasefire and all this. And so people are talking. I've had, I don't know, I'm gonna count them, but I've had several phone calls and several letters from the inmates, and they're all asking, is this it? We got the whole world coming against Israel. David has the best answer. It's like, yeah, that's rumors of wars, and there is a war, and there's wars going on. So it's just part of the end time scenario, but it is a time then you have to start thinking about time. And you've heard David, those of you who've heard David teach before, and he's always said that one thing that the people that predicted the end of time, they were all had in common was that they were all wrong. 2,000 years, they've been wrong. And they're wrong now. Because people looking at this and they say, well, we're in chaos. Well, the whole world's not in chaos. We might be in chaos in this country with the system that we have right now, but maybe that's not really chaos. And it could be dark times. But spiritually speaking, the world is in a chaotic state with all the things that go on in our government, our political systems that we get tied up in. No matter how hard you try not to be looking at that stuff and how your heart doesn't go out for some of these things, you still get attached to it and you still think about it, and it causes you think. Anyway, it does me, and I'm sure it does everybody else. So how do we, Yeshua said only the Father knows. When the disciples said, is this when you'll restore the kingdom to Israel? And he says, only the Father knows, right? And I believe that that's true. Only he knows. And we have to look at time. How long have we been involved in the time of the Creator? According to the scriptures, we've only been here about 6,000 years, maybe, according to the scriptures. How long has the Creator been here? How long has the Creator been in existence? It's a question, and it really is. How long has this universe that he created, everything in it, how long has it been in existence? How long has he been out there? According to the Word, he's been there forever, and he'll be here forever. He's going to set up a kingdom, and it's going to last forever. And I would hope that every one of us in this assembly, in fact, I know all of us eventually are going to be in that kingdom. Okay? And we're going to be there forever. So what part is man's time in this eternity? Can you measure it? Somewhere in the scriptures, in Isaiah, and I think also in Jeremiah, Yahuwah makes a comment, and he says, man is but a breath, or man is just a moment. So if you snap I can't snap my fingers because I got arthritis, but if you snapped your finger, that's a moment right there. That's what he says our time span is. That's all we are in his universe, in his span. So I was looking at when did our time start, really? I went in and started at Genesis, and it says, in the beginning, Yahuwah created, there's an olive tav in there, the olive tav, and I know it says throughout the scriptures the word, and the word is Yeshua, but that's not necessarily what I've come to find out, because it's the olive tav is the signature of the Creator. The olive and the tav came about. He had to have the olive tav to make an alphabet so that there was words to create. Does that sound logical? So anyway, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Yeshua isn't the word, because throughout the scripture, he is the word, he is speaking. But in most cases, when you go through all of the scriptures, 9,270 or 9,720 times, I forget, I didn't write it down, I wasn't going to go back and research it again. The olive tav appears in the Old Testament throughout all of the writings. The only place it doesn't appear is in Esther. But in other places throughout the scripture, you're going to find the olive tav stuck in, even in Psalms. So the olive tav is the signature of the Creator. It's his manifestation on what he's doing. Okay, so that olive tav, when you're seeing it, it's his mark. The olive is is in the alphabet is the ox, which is power, which is strength, which is the mighty one, the number one, and the tav is actually a mark. It's a signature or a sign or a mark. So you have the Creator's mark, the olive tav, and everything in between that is his creation, and that's what he used to create. So on the first day, the earth, he created, he says in the beginning he created the earth. But he doesn't tell us how long between that time when he created the earth that he decided to put life on the earth, because when he started putting light into the earth, which was dark and void, a chaos, it was all in chaos. When he brought that light in, it brought the life in, because you can't have life without light, okay? So he brought the light in. The light was the Word. And throughout scriptures, Yeshua was the light because he was the Word. This is a book of light. So he brought about light, and he did his 6 days of creating, and on the 6th day was when he put really all the life in it. He put everything for 6 days. For 5 days he put the light in it, and he put everything that would sustain what he was going to create. And then he put the plants and the animals and so on, the fish in the sea, and then the last thing he did was mankind. On the 7th day, he said he rested. Chapter 2, verse 1 and 2, he said on the 7th day, he rested from his work, and I think he sanctified the 7th day, okay? And I don't know if you guys have ever researched the 7th day, but there is nowhere, and this has to do with my time, and I'm going to go in a big circle, and I hope I don't get, it doesn't get strange or not interesting, because I think it's pretty interesting. Nowhere in the Genesis will you see the word 7th day or the Sabbath mentioned. You might see 7th day talking about somebody's age and their birth date or something like that, which is another thing. So how did we have time? Well, let's go into the garden. How long was Adam and Eve in the garden? We don't know. Because now we're talking about a different realm. We're talking about the kingdom. Okay, so Adam and Eve were in the garden. And they were in the garden and they were in the garden until they messed up, and then they were out of the garden. In the last verse of chapter 1, he says, when he created man and woman, he said, be fruitful and multiply. But they didn't multiply in the garden. Were they meant to be in the garden forever? I don't think so, but I know he had a plan, but he put them in the garden to give man, us, today, a picture of what his kingdom was going to be like. Okay? So he put man out of the garden, and then they multiplied, and they started having children. So we know that from that time forward, we know time only by the ages of the men that went from Seth to Noah. And so forth on up to Abraham. But I'm only dealing up to Noah. 1,546 years or something like that. Anyway, you add those days together. When he, at the age of 500 years old, he had already had his 3 sons. At that time, there was 1,540 some years, or 46 years. So by the time the ark came around, you have to add another 100 years to it. He was 600 years old. So, but how did we know these ages? How did they know? Did they know? Do you all know who wrote Genesis, right? Moses. No. He copied it, or what would you call it?
He was told it.
Huh?
He was told it.
Yeah.
By the word of Jehovah.
The Creator told him. So the Creator knew the age of these people, because he was following them, because this was his blood, this was the lineage, all the way to the time that he became flesh and walked among men. In John 1:14. So we know from that he was following the lineage of his people all the way up to that, okay? All the way to Yeshua, that lineage never fell. But he knew in Genesis, he kept time, or the reason we have the time, or able to keep it, is by the ages of men. When you get to Abraham, it's the first time you hear somebody say, I am 90, or I'm 90, or I'm 100 years old, and my wife is 92, and we shall have a child at this age. Moses didn't know that. But evidently, Abraham did. So maybe there was a way that in the time of Abraham, who was pretty much a nomadic person, because he moved around quite a bit, as did all of the patriarchs, and as did the tribe of Israel. So their time was taken by how old the person was, and they must have had something that was going on in their life. Maybe they were smart enough, because they did have to be planters, they had to be gatherers and hunters, and they were sheep herders. So they had to have a means of knowing the cycle of the moon and what would happen every year. There would come a warm time, and then there would become a warmer time, and then it would be cool, and then it would be cold, and then it would have these 4 cycles. And then maybe like the guy says, well, man, last year this time, oh, I remember that. It's been this way every year. I must be 20 years I've seen this, or whatever, I don't know. Somehow they had to figure it out. But there was no given time of how to keep track of years, months, and days until we get to Exodus. And in Exodus 12, somebody return to Exodus 12. I can do it, I think. Exodus 12. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe and to Aaron in Mizraim, saying, this month is the beginning of months for you. It is the first month of the year for you. That's the first place in the scriptures that we see for the house of Israel, for his people, this was the beginning of time for them, or the beginning of a method of keeping time. He gives them the 15 days into unleavened bread. He goes through up to the Passover. And as he goes farther into it, he starts giving them little notes in there, little deals. He talks about coming to him 6 times, and he doesn't even introduce the Sabbath here. He just says that this is the beginning of months, and he doesn't say that Passover is he just says you're going to do this forever. It's a festival forever, and you're going to do this on the 15th day. You're going to eat unleavened bread, and you're going to do it, and you're not going to work. He says those things. Later on, he starts talking about the 3 times a year that they have to come to him, so then we get into first fruits, and we get into tabernacles, or Yom Teruah, really. So he's given him a time. He finally works it up to where he introduces the Sabbath. Go back. Do you see anywhere in Genesis that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Noah, Shem, anybody in there ever kept the Sabbath or pointed to the Sabbath, or they said they kept the Sabbath? You don't see it in there. But I've had people say, well, yeah, it says Abraham kept all his covenants and commandments and statutes. But is what it really was, if you read it, there was something that was going on at that time. Abraham, or Yahuwah, made a covenant with Abraham. He made him a promise. I'm going to give you this land, provided you obey. And if we read all the way through Abraham's life, when he finally offered Isaac up, he had been tested 10 times, and each one of these times was a covenant or a lesson, a teaching, instruction of what he had to do in order to, so he said, take your son, your only son, and take him up. And he's going to offer him. And then finally, when he raises his knife, he says, now I know you love me. He tested him 10 times, and he passed all of them. That's what he kept. And when I read it, that's what I see. Abraham kept everything that the Creator told him to do. Isaac did the same thing. Jacob, on the other hand, he called out to him. He revealed himself to Jacob more than he did to Isaac, I think, because we don't have much on Isaac, but we do know that he revealed himself to Jacob. But you never see Jacob teaching his boys about the Sabbath. He taught him how to raise goats and herd sheep. But he didn't talk much about, and he talked about raising a lot of kids, but he never talked about the Sabbath or the feast days. They were never there. They were never mentioned. So what I'm presenting is that the children of Israel didn't know that. They had even forgot the circumcision, I do believe, because Moses had to be circumcised, and then they had to circumcise all of the men when they came out of Egypt. And then, of course, when they all died in the wilderness and before they went into the land, they had to be circumcised again because none of those men were circumcised in the wilderness. And we know it's supposed to be circumcised on the 8th day. That was a thing that the Creator made with Abraham, that they would circumcise the child on the 8th day. So they had forgot all of that. So maybe they forgot all about the Sabbath, or maybe they never knew about the Sabbath, and maybe they didn't know about the feast days. So that's what I'm presenting to you. In time, our time, in the time before they got, this is the day, this is the beginning of months. This is the first day of the year, or the months of the years, or however he's got it in 12. That's when their time started. That's how they've been keeping time through all these years, except for one thing. Somewhere along the line, man got into it and started deciding when this moon would show up. And this is not a new moon, full moon, whatever kind of moon there is, dark moon or anything. It's just a matter of science. There's 3 or 4 days that you can have in there that can be the new moon, that it can come out. You can have 3 days of darkness, or 1 day or 2 days. And if you look at the sliver, you could even have a day added onto it. So back then, when they were going through the wilderness, it was kept perfect, because the Creator was there to make sure that Aaron and Moses made sure that the people knew that these things were happening. We don't see it, but in Leviticus 23, he's very specific about his feast days. And it starts with the Sabbath, verse 1. So we know they were doing that through it. And there was times when they messed up, and he took care of business. But that went into the land, okay? So we know that's when our timekeeping. So how many celebrated New Year's last week? How many of you recognized that it was a new year? you can't tell me that you didn't recognize that it was a new year. Everybody got Happy New Year, right?
There was a loud enough boom
Huh?
at
Well, I
midnight.
slept through it. I mean, I quit that about 1998 or so,
There was a loud
when I
enough
couldn't,
boom.
yeah, I just quit it. But anyway, my thing is this, we're stuck in a solar system, a solar calendar system, and we've been directed by the Creator to use that moon cycle. And so we've messed up both ways. And so my time that we're doing, how do we move? We can't move out of the system that's on this planet because it's run by the majority of the people in the world. We have the Sunday worshipers, we have the Friday worshipers, and I think there's some out there that are Tuesday, that they think Tuesday's a Sabbath. So anyway, so we have all these different people out there, but they all work on this calendar, the solar calendar that's been ingrained by a world power, because the whole world looks at the same solar calendar. But we were told to use this calendar. Now, I know that we use it, we recognize it when it comes around to the time of Passover, and we do Passover, and we do unleavened bread, and we keep that week of unleavened bread. We have the 2 Sabbaths. We try at our best to do first fruits, which is an appointed time to help us understand Shavuot, okay? And then we have the 3 feasts, 4 days in the 7th month. The first day is Yom Teruah. These are all pictures. They're shadows of things to come and pictures of things. We know that at Yom Teruah is going to have the blast of the shofar to announce the Creator coming back to claim his people. There's going to be a day of judgment, atonement, and then there's going to be this end of the kingdom. It's a picture of the tabernacle, and then we go through that 7 days, and we're going to be the last great day when? Depends on how you're reading the scriptures. There's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, I think. So we try to do that, but how do we do that in our daily lives without getting confused? How many of you send a Valentine out? I got married on Valentine's Day. So me and Carol kind of go like this, because we do recognize our anniversary, because it's going to be 44 years this year. So you look at that and you think, how do we get past this? I know we all turn our back on Easter, right? And most everybody turns their back on Christmas, but it's still out there. And we see it, so we turn our back on it. But our time is laid out in the scriptures for us. And so this is for you. He's talking to Moses and Aaron and the house of Israel. And we're part of the house of Israel. Now, how do we do this? I'm open for comment on this. I'm not trying to just throw something out here that's wild and crazy, but we are living in a time zone that is a blink of the eye for the Creator. This time zone, that's what he said, man is just a breath, or man is just a moment. How do we locate ourselves in this time? In this, I don't know what to call it. David.
All right.
David's been waving his hand at me, so, and I need help. So.
Dealing with the Sabbath alone, I appreciate what you're bringing up. The Sabbath was given to the children of Israel, pure and simple. It was not given to the world.
That's right.
And there's a reason why it was given to the children of Israel. And it's because it's a sign to the world that these are his people, those that keep the 7th-day Sabbath. As John brought up, there are other religions that, keep it on Friday. There are some that keep it on Sunday. There are some that keep it throughout the week. Every day can be a Sabbath to somebody.
Yeah, that's true.
But to the children of Israel, it's well defined, 7th day. All right. So I agree with you. Sabbath wasn't given to anyone up until this time in chapter 12, when he says, okay, this is when it begins. And this is when, and then 7 days later, then Sabbath began.
Well, yeah, when you go on, the next thing that he does, he starts out training them. John was doing a teaching on manna last week or a couple weeks ago. And manna was the tool that he used. It was not manna is a picture of the bread of life. It's a picture of the word, it's the life.
What,
And he used that.
Let me bring this up. Why was manna given to the children of Israel?
So they could live, eat,
Huh?
so they'd have something to eat.
Nope.
As a test.
It's a training tool.
Huh? Amanda?
A test.
It was a test.
Yeah,
It was a test to see if they would keep his commandments. Yes, it was, it did provide food for them. But it was, the intention there was, it was more spiritual food than real food.
right. That's why I said it's the bread of life.
Yeah, the bread of life. Man does not live,
By bread alone.
yes, but by every word
Oh.
that proceeds from
Yeah.
there.
So regarding the Sabbath though, and I know they gave it specifically then, but it's kinda like, he showed us in the scriptures patterns, of what it was gonna be like, even from the very beginning, in like 6 days, and then he rested. So even though he didn't specifically say it right, it was a pattern, like you see these things that he has for his people patterned out, and then specifically said more in detail later.
Right.
Well, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that there's nowhere in scripture that it says they did it in Genesis, okay? There's nowhere where he commanded them to do it. And my thinking on this is, and sometimes my thinking gets a little out there, if the Creator is dictating to Moses, I'm sure that Moses wrote down every word that he said because the Creator told him to several times. Write these words down. He did the commandments. He wrote it. Wasn't the Torah supposed to be written and hung on the side of the Ark of the Covenant? And it was supposed to be there for who? For the people, so that they could take it generation to generation. And if you look at when Joshua's name spelled Yeshua, because he was the one that delivered the people into the land, and Yeshua is Yah's deliverance, so Yahuwah delivers. So he was the one that delivered it. There's several priests that were named Yeshua in the scriptures if you go through, but English people made sure the translation said something different because they didn't want it to be confused with Yeshua the Messiah. But anyway, when he went into the land, he read that to all the people when they got to Shiloh. That was the last thing that he did. Did you ever guys ever realize, just as I thought, there's no genealogy for Joshua or Yeshua going in? There's no genealogy, it just tells you where he came from.
Oh.
It doesn't tell you, there's nothing after that. It's kind of different. There's nothing to follow. He got there and that was it. But he did lead him into the kingdom. He delivered him into the kingdom. But getting back to this time that we're in and the time frames and how this works, this is something that we were given by the Creator that we're supposed to do. And now everybody in here keeps Sabbath. I know that because we're all here. And we all try to do it. Sometimes people get, I've talked to D'Art has his ideas on what you can do on the Sabbath and what you can't. David has his. I have mine. You can take the scripture and you can read it and you can see where you fit in to the scripture. It says to refrain from work. But we know that there's times when somebody that's a nurse's aide or somebody that's taking care of somebody, that's work. And they have to do that. Maybe it's that or lose a life or whatever, or lose a job or however it works, I don't know. Sometimes people are into those situations. I'll give you a story though. My son, Carol's son, my son, I've had him for most of his life, 99% of his life. He worked for Sears and he was a comptroller. He did all the payroll, all the hiring and firing. He did all the finances. And he was at the Victorsville store. And when we started doing the Sabbath, he said, well, what do I do? Because I got to work at least 2 weekends a month. Oh, it's up to you. You got to figure it out. I tried helping him, and so he went into his boss and he told him, he says, listen, I'm not going to work from sundown Friday night until sundown Saturday night. If you want me to do inventory, I'll do it from 6:30 or dark on Saturday night until Sunday morning, and I'll work every Sunday, every month, all month long. I'll only take one day off, and it's gonna be Sabbath, but from 4 o'clock Friday, I'm gonna be gone, and I'll be back if you want me. And they told him he couldn't do it, and he didn't do it, he just did it anyway, cause he did the time cards and everything, but he had it, and after a while, it just got to be a thing, and when they transferred him down to Riverside, when he walked in the door, the gal that was the manager goes, "Oh, I see you don't work on the Sabbath." She said, "I like you Jewish people." She said, "You light a lot of candles too." And so he was okay with it, but so sometimes those things work out,
Yeah.
but sometimes they don't. But anyway, we know that we're trying to keep Sabbath, okay? And we try to keep the feast days to the best of our ability for the information that we have, to try to keep them on time. And I'm sure that if we really look back in history, if somebody, myself, 25 years ago, if I was doing this Passover the way they said to do it 25 years ago, today, even though I started trying to do it on the projected time, I would still be about 10 days off, somewhere along the line, that I would have lost somewhere in there. There would have been 10 years that I missed it, no matter what. So think back to Yeshua's time, or say the time of 350 when BC, when the Romans were working, the czars and everybody, and they started putting the laws against the Jews. They had a Jew tax that if you kept Sabbath, you had to pay a tax on it, and nobody wanted to talk to you because you was the Christ-killing Jews and all this stuff. So what happens if somebody decided to change the Passover just maybe one day? And then they kept doing that every year. On that same day, they'd be 2,000 years off, or 2,000 days off this year, or in our time. So we are doing it to the best that we can. So I know that that's the best that the Creator looks down. I don't see anybody in here that's perfect, because He said nobody is perfect, right? So this whole thing is about how do we keep time? How do we work within this system? A contractor like Jeff, he's working, I work in the construction industry. You work according to their times, We don't work according to our times. So when it came around, of course, I was still working for three years. I retired 3 years after I came into the faith, but I started doing the feast days, and I was taking off, and I had cut a deal that I got 3 weeks vacation a year, or 4 weeks vacation, so I would use the vacation days for my Passover. If I want to take Passover off, take 2 days, I'd take Passover. If I want to do unleavened bread, I could take the whole week off. If I wanted to do tabernacles, so I could do that. But a lot of people out there can't do that. They just, how many other Israelites do you know out there that do the Passover when it's convenient? I know a few. They do it because they said, well, we can't do that in the middle of the week, so we're gonna do the Passover on Saturday night after the Sabbath service. I don't know if that's acceptable. We can't do tabernacles for a whole week. You can't have everybody take 7 or 8 days off and not be at work. So we're gonna do it for one weekend. And there's groups out there, Messianic groups, that do it that way. And so, how do we do it? See, we, as individuals, we're all, and I know everybody in here, individually, we're trying to do those things according to the way He does it. But are we, I know He looks down and He's gonna give us an A for trying, I think. As Roberta used to say, we're in constant pursuit of Torah. Okay, Torah is instructions. There's a whole book of instructions in here. It's all over the place. You've got instructions all the way through it. And I look at them and I know there's things that I miss a lot on. And I'm not gonna do it again, but guess what? I trip and fall and do it again. So, my thinking on this is, if we look back at the beginning, and Zephaniah, Zechariah, one of the two, it says, he reveals the end in the beginning. Or some scriptures say, he knows the end from the beginning, But he reveals the end in the beginning. So I want to go back to that chaotic world out there. I just talked to David about it a minute ago when I walked in, because when he says, are we in the time of Noah? Have you ever thought about that, what's going on out there in the world? Not in our world, in their world. People are partying, doing everything is hunky-dory, having parties, living it up. What else is supposed to happen in the end? Well, we got good is evil now, and evil is good in a lot of instances when we see what's going on in the world. When they're talking about, oh, well, that's good, that's evil, So they kind of flip-flop it. It depends on what side of the fence you're standing on, how you hear it, but that's the way they project it to me. So we have all those things going. So when we look at the beginning, that chaos that was at the beginning on the world, and he brought in the light, which is the Word. Are we in that chaotic world today? Is that the chaotic world we're in?
I don't think it's close. I don't even think
I
it's
know,
close yet.
We're in it, but we're not. But we don't have to be part of it. But we're still we still get that stuff sticks to us. What do you think, David? You talk.
Well, the scripture that comes up to me is when Yeshua was talking to his disciples, or talking to the Father actually, about his disciples being in the world, because his prayer, Yeshua's prayer was, Father, you can't take them out of the world, but don't let them be of the world. And every generation has had to go through that. I mean, as John talked about, we're set up in a system here that we can't go off and do our own thing. We cannot be independent of the general way of doing things. It'd be nice if we could. And I've said for years that this world is not set up for the 7-day Sabbath. But one day it will be. I firmly believe that. But as the chaos that John talks about, that looks like it's in the world today, it's just chaos. It's just, to me, the greatest chaos, to be honest with you, in Genesis, is when he separated the waters. I mean, if you really think about that, the amount of power and energy that would have to take a big body of water and move it out away from another body of water.
Well, it's easy for him.
Well, it's easy for him. However, I mean, if you really think about it,
looking at it, it's very.
In going through, the reading of the throne room that we were doing this morning. No one has ever seen the throne room. No one has ever been in the throne room. They may think they've been there, but no one ever has.
Well, it's just like,
Because it's way beyond, the throne room is way beyond the upper water. The upper water is way beyond the nearest star we can see.
But there is a body of water out there somewhere.
There is a body of water out there. But that's what, we have to remember. This is greater than the sum of us, so to speak.
What is it, Revelation, when John's looking up at the throne, or he sees the Creator sitting above the ark?
Well, even Stephen, yeah.
But I mean, that was, But I mean, that's the only picture that's really the only true picture we have. Nobody ever seen that inside of that except the high priest.
But that was a vision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so, but, coming back to your whole, essence of time, one of the things that, as John was talking, what time frame is the Father in today? What time frame is he in?
7th day.
Huh?
7th day. He's beyond time.
Well, no, he's beyond time, but it
But
still
we're
gives a
still
time
on,
in Genesis.
He's still on Sabbath. He's still on,
6 days were created, huh?
he's still on the Sabbath. He's still on
He's still
Shabbat.
resting.
We're waiting for that Sabbath, it's,
To be complete.
yeah.
And
'cause
when will
he's-
that Sabbath be complete?
Yeah, because he never, everything that he did on the sixth, 1, 2, 3, 4, he said it was good. And then on the sixth day, he said it was very good. But on the Sabbath, he never said anything, he
Yeah.
just said it was there. So there's a Sabbath waiting for us somewhere.
And
for
we call that
end.
Sabbath the kingdom,
Right.
the millennial kingdom. And it says it's going to be 1,000 years, which it could be 1,000 years, our timekeeping, or it could be longer. We don't know, and John brought this up, and we don't know the time frame that it really took. Well, you did bring this up, the time frame that it took from day 1 to day 6. We don't know how long that took.
And we don't know how long they were in the garden.
And we don't know how long they were in the garden. The one thing we do know is from, Seth on up to today. We can figure that out. However, everybody thought when Yeshua came in the flesh, when the word of Yah came in the flesh, that was the time that he was gonna come and set up, he was gonna ascend to heaven and come back down and set up his kingdom. Well,
And?
it's been 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm gonna make a statement, and a lot of people don't like it when I do this. This could go on for another 2,000 years.
Or more. Our time.
Or more, you know,
Yeah, you got-
because we count time.
If you go back to his time, it's still a flash, it's just a flash
Yeah.
in his time. He's looking down on it, he knows what's happening, he knows where it's going.
But the important thing that I try to present is, we know a kingdom is coming, we know it's gonna be here on this earth. We sang a song, you opened up with that song. The prayer talks about the kingdom, it's going to come and it's going to be here. At some point, we don't know when it is, as John pointed out. The disciples asked Yeshua, when this is all gonna take place, he says, not for you to know, because only the Father knows. That's where I leave it.
Yeah, well, that's true, and that's basically what I said when somebody says, well, look at what's happening to Israel, and I said, that's not Israel. I said, Israel is a people, it's not a state.
Right.
And they look at you like you're nuts, so, but they don't care. I was gonna just make a comment, my oldest brother passed away a couple weeks ago, about a week ago. And, yeah, on the 28th, same day my great-granddaughter was born. So anyway, one left and one came. He was a very devout Jehovah's Witness, and he was bedridden for about a month, maybe 6 weeks before he passed away. And he was calling all of his brothers and sisters, and I had conversations with him monthly, never more than 2 months apart, but usually monthly or a couple of times a month. And he was always telling me how close I was, is all I needed to understand Jehovah and how this kingdom works. And they have some really good writings on it, but the writings are all the commentaries of men of what the scripture says, and that's what a lot of people out there hear. But I want to tell you what, he went to the grave loving the Creator. And I mean, his last thing was, his whole last days was contacting his brothers and sisters and the people that he thought needed. But he was the overseer for Deschutes County. So I was looking at going up there for the funeral, and then they said, well, there are gonna be about 2,000 people there. I decided they don't need me there. I was just gonna be there for my sister-in-law, but she's gonna have enough support there. So the whole county is turning out. So he was somebody that a lot of people was. Now, I'm not sure, but he knows he's gonna be in the grave, and he's gonna be sleeping, waiting for the resurrection, so. And that's where we're all headed. But the whole thing is going back to that time thing, and we, I was just gonna see if I had put any, if I should read any of my, no, I shouldn't anyway. I have a lot of notes on there, and I'm thinking about what, you know, what could be said or committed, but everybody's got their own thinking on this, and I know, I would look at, Alfonso over there, and I know this guy studies. And remarkably, if you ever sat down with him and you can get him to talk, he's a wealth of knowledge. I've done it a couple of times at Tabernacle. And sometimes he even speaks up here. But I know that he studies this stuff, and I think he's probably got his mind going there and thinking I'm a little bit crazy on it, or he might, whatever. But I'm just thinking, we all have our, what we're doing in our minds as right, or what we're doing in our heart is right, okay? Our relationship, my relationship with the Creator doesn't involve you. You're just part of my relationship with this relationship. But my relationship is with Him. It's not about seeking out following man's religions. And we got a whole world full of them. This is not a man's religion as far as I'm concerned. This is a following of the children of Israel, just like we went through the wilderness for 40 years from Egypt, we were following. We just don't have that column out there to follow, and we don't have that flame at night. But He's still there, and we can still follow Him, and we have to follow Him to the best of our ability. And what we're doing is a direct relationship with Him. When you looked at the disciples, they all had a relationship with Yeshua. And Yeshua basically was, he and the Father were one. If you read our Shema, when it starts, it says, Yahuwah is Akkad, which means one, or a unit that's all the same going. They're not going different ways. They're all the same purpose and the same point, okay? So however He manifested Himself throughout the scriptures, it was always for the same purpose. It was pointing us to the kingdom of heaven here on earth, and that was Yeshua's gospel. The kingdom was at hand. That's what He came preaching, first to the Jews and then to Israel, but He was there for the house of Israel, and when He went into the Jews, it was looking for the lost sheep of the house of Israel among the Jews. So, that's the path we follow. This is the path that Yeshua directed us. Now, none of us can walk on water, and I would love to see somebody do some miracles, but like our sister was talking today, we see miracles every day that we don't even pay attention to. We have them out there. The fact that we're alive and breathing, and we're healthy, somewhat healthy, most of us, that's a miracle in itself, just taking care of ourselves and having somebody that wants to take care of us. Or taking good care of yourself and by trying to give yourself some longevity like Amanda's doing. Out walking. Next week she'll be seeing on the email that she'll be running a mile instead of walking.
No.
Yeah.
But you never know.
Not what? I'm not running. You see me running, you better start running too.
Well, take a rope with an anchor on it, so you know how to stop. But anyway, no, I'm kidding. I'm not just kidding. But see, trying to take care of yourself, that's good, because that's what He wants you to do. Because you're the tabernacle. He says in the scriptures, He says you're the temple. Well, if you look up the Greek translation of temple, it means sanctuary. Sanctuary is a dwelling place. He's not talking about the man-made temple. He's talking about His tabernacle, the dwelling place. He never dwelt in the temple. He only dwelt in the tabernacle when He was here on earth. So that's what it's pointing at. You're the temple. We're the temple, and He came to dwell in us. He didn't come to dwell among us. He came to dwell in us. If you read John, it says, some says among, or He pitched His tent, He did this. But if you go back and research the word, it's in. He lived. Among translates in modern Hebrew as in. Ancient Hebrew, it's definitely in. So He came to be in man. And so, why do we do the things that we do? Try to keep the temple clean, right? If He's going to dwell there, it's got to be clean, or He's not going to be there. So that's the point I'd leave you with. I don't have much more than that. But if anybody's got anything they want to say, or throw some rocks or something, or anything, it's open. No? Well, good for you guys.